Right. Exactly. And then,
Yeah. Yeah.
then you're learning a lot of good, valuable lessons about physics, but also just life in general.
Learning a lot about physics. I like that. That's going to be the line for the episode.
This is Alex Johnson, welcoming you back to Upper Back Hair, episode number 2, part number 2 with Malick Djiba, picking up right where we left off from part 1. Hopefully you checked out that whole video. If not, it was released about a week ago. Check it out. But we got this one here from you. Again, we're gonna lead you in right with what we were just dropping at the very end of that episode. So hope you enjoy. Thanks.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you said that, because that's basically what I ended up doing. I ended up basically giving him more than we agreed on, but I just gave him the money.
Yeah.
I came home and I had a conversation with Chris, and Chris was like, "Well, it doesn't matter how objective you try to be. Like, he's not going to see that. Like, he's not in a place that you're in. So you need to understand."
Right.
And I was like, okay.
Yeah, and this kind of ties into one of the other topics you wanted to bring up.
Yeah.
So I'm going to kind of use this as a jump point here.
Okay.
So this gets into how can we meet people where they're at in their emotional state, right? Had you met him in his emotional state of how can I help you? Yeah. Also, here's this other thing that I'd like to utilize. Would this be a way that I can help you? The whole conversation changes. The whole response changes. And one of the nexus here to this other topic was that, you were talking about some difficulties in dealing with family members in ways that can be challenging. And at least from my recollection of a particular conversation, maybe this is a particular instance you want to refer to, maybe it's not, where you kind of had to meet the family member at the state they were in, because they were going through some life stage changes and trying to hold on in ways that you found to be detrimental, but had a difficult time getting to a meeting of the minds.
Yeah. So, I've been having a lot of difficulties as well with family members, mostly parents. And, it's teaching me a lot about, what direction my evolution as a human being needs to take, especially with dealing with, the parental units, and then, siblings, family, whatever. But, it's, I have not learned the lesson yet. The one lesson I've learned so far, like, I've not learned the full lesson. The one lesson I've learned so far is that, when I'm dealing with parents, I have African parents, for anybody out there who's watching or listening, they know exactly what that means. African parents are very unique in the way that the parent-child relationship is mostly sort of a power dynamic. There is not a lot of affection, that's shown, from parent to child, or the other way around, usually in that relationship. Your parents are just basically like authority figures a lot of time. And that's fine. It is what it is. It's just, it's a matter of cultural differences. But the problem is, for me, I think these types of discussions, had they happen in a universe where I never left my home country, that would have been okay, because they deal with these types of situations a little differently back home in Senegal than people would here in the West.
Okay.
But, I basically immigrated to the United States as a young man with family, about 18 years ago. That completely changed my life. I realized that, I could achieve sort of, self-determination, that I could
Hmm.
be a person and that I could have my own opinions.
So if I were to just cast in very broad brushstrokes here, one of the chief differences among American culture versus most other world cultures, especially African and I would say Asian, is that the American culture is heavily individualistic,
Right.
where that is not the case in a lot of the world. So is it fair to say that arriving in the United States showed you what individualism even is?
In a lot of ways, yeah, yeah, I could agree with that. It's individualism, but it's also, being in America sort of really changed my perspective as to, you know, the degree of human interaction that you could have with a loved one.
Mm.
Because I didn't know that, I could voice my opinion, you know, whether it's an agreeing opinion or a different opinion, relative to my parents, as a kid in Africa. I didn't know that. That just wasn't an option for me.
Do you remember where you did learn that specifically?
No, it was more of a gradual thing. It was more of an evolution. It's like, just, me imbuing myself into the American culture, me sort of assimilating and learning about, you know, different ways that people can treat each other. Because when you live in a particular society, right, and you've never sort of gotten out of the confines of that society, you don't know anything else. You only know
Yeah.
what, but when you get out and you're exposed to different things, like, you know, like in my culture, like we don't really touch. We touch, but like, like let me sort of unpack that. So like in my culture, like here's the difference. Like in Senegal, it's okay for, you know, two male counterparts to touch, to hold hands, to touch while talking, to walk holding hands. That's not kosher in America, because in America, that's considered as,
It's usually an expression of a romantic involvement
sort of romantic
or
thing.
parent child.
Yeah. But in Senegal, that's totally okay. But you flip that coin, in Senegal, people don't really hug.
Hmm.
Like parents don't hug their child. My parents never told me that they loved me.
Ever.
Not in Senegal, no. Like
Yeah.
I remember when my mom started doing that. Like I called my sister. Like the first time, it was in Iowa actually. When
Really?
I was talking to my mom, and towards the end of the conversation, before she hung up, she told me that she loved me in English,
Huh.
and like that surprised me. Like I
Yeah.
literally paused for like 2 seconds, and I was like, "What?" That's not part of our vernacular. It's not part of how we express love.
I have a jump off question here for you,
Yeah.
and we'll jump back in. Um, would you say that you have softened a little bit over the last 10 years in your personality and the way that you express yourself? Would you say that you're warmer now than you were when you showed up in law school?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because that I do think is true. And I can't help but wonder the impact of a very soft, vulnerable, tender expression that it is to say you love somebody, what kind of an effect that had on you.
I didn't know how to deal with it. I really didn't. Like the first time it happened, I was just like, I didn't even say it back.
Man, so I come from the total opposite. I was raised in a bowl of sugar of I love you.
Yeah.
Not which that's not a complaint. It's just the reality that I had,
Yeah.
and it can be great, but it's sort of it's sort of an opposite effect. Like you instead of um, a grown up authority figure, which my parents still were authority figures to me, but I shared a lot of my own opinions and disagreements all the time. Because I guess there's something to be said that when you get the "I love you" candy over and over and over, it sort of validates that as I am, I'm good. Okay, this is
Right.
what I think. Uh,
That's awesome.
I never really thought of that as a shared connection to those two things as interrelated, but maybe they are.
It was crazy. It was crazy. So like, I literally called my sister, and I was like, who is she hanging out with? Like, that's what asked her. Like, who's mom hanging out with? Like, she just called me. We had a conversation. At the end of it, she told me she loved me in English.
Mm.
And it took me a while to get used to it. And she doesn't do it anymore. Like, I felt like it was like a phase she was in. She was like, in
Oh,
her way, she was trying to like assimilate into
do you
the.
miss it?
I don't, because I'm gonna say to my daughter. I mean, I tell her all the time, I love you, Daddy loves you. Like, I don't
Do you
say
do
that.
that to your mom?
No, no, because that's not what I'm used to with her.
Have you considered reversing the tide? Because and here's one of the reasons I ask. This wasn't actually initially on my mind, but then I thought about this, and I'm like, oh yeah, definitely. Showing that as an example to your daughter,
Showing what?
so she gets to watch you express your love for your parents, because she's gonna figure out eventually that she never saw that
Yeah,
at some point.
right.
So I challenge you to at least consider. We're not here to change minds right now, but to think on that, to think on what that could mean, to let her see it be reflected elsewhere as well.
I'll think about it. So see, the issue with that is, I my parents raised me, so like they raised me a certain way.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So like, for me, when she started saying those things to me, like, it was completely like out of left.
Weird.
It was weird. I was weirded out by it. Eventually, like, I came around. She would say it, and I'll say it back. But like, it was a phase because she doesn't do it anymore. But most importantly, like, that's not how we show love in our culture.
Yeah.
In our culture, the way we show love, being it's mostly like a sort of authoritarian sort of power dynamic that you have with your parents. Like, the love is shown by just doing things. Like, my mom showed me love by you know teaching me how to read and write.
Mm.
I didn't go to kindergarten for, basically I got kicked out of kindergarten because my dad wouldn't pay. He just decided
Mm.
he's not paying for kindergarten anymore, so they kicked me out. But my mom taught me how to read and write. Like, I was hanging out with her all, she would take me everywhere that she went. You know, I remember the first elevator ride I was on was with my mom because she decided to take me downtown Dakar to this building, and it had an elevator, and like, I was like, oh my god, what is this? So it was like an
Because for those who don't know, again, he's a village boy. Even though
right.
Dakar is a big city, but he's a village boy.
Right. So like, we took this elevator ride, and like, it was amazing. So that's how parents show love to their children. Not necessarily saying that they love you, but you having that sort of access to them.
The physical proximity and doing together.
Right. And so when she
Okay.
started saying that to me, it was weird. And back to this topic, this current struggle I'm having with you know parents. There's this notion that's floating around social media of toxic people, toxic friends.
Toxicity. Yeah. It's a
Exactly.
it's a buzzword of the last 5 years.
Right. And you know because of my current evolution as a human being, and the fact that I'm a transplant, you know because I come from a completely different universe and have been transplanted into this American society, you know, both places sort of, you know, uh, dictate, the course of my evolution as a human being. But my parents don't have that same thing. You know, they live most of their lives in Senegal.
Mhm.
Only came here towards the tail end of you know, the arc, their life arc. And so because of that, there's been quite a bit of conflict between myself and them recently. And part of that conflict is this sort of toxicity, because everything is relative. This wouldn't be seen as toxic in Senegal,
Mhm.
the way in which that they behave and conduct themselves. But in the present setting that we're in, it is toxic because it only breeds conflict and disagreements, you know. And part of it is because they're so set in their ways, that to them, they're done evolving. And I adhere to the school of thought that evolution does not,
Doesn't
you
stop.
doesn't stop. No matter where you are in life, you are still able to learn new things about yourself, about the people that you love, the people around you, and then so on and so forth, right? But
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I think that mindset is probably one of the things that made us become closer as friends. Actually, after law school, um, was just kind of a, you know, uh, I don't even know that it was a conscious recognition. It probably wasn't even conscious recognition initially,
right,
but at some point, it's just sort of a self-filtering mechanism. Most
right,
of the people that I surround myself with voluntarily, without having realized it, are the people who continue to want to see growth and change. Now, I've been fortunate. My parents made the choice to continue changing. Um, and I'll just use politics as an example. I was raised in a Catholic home, um, in a Catholic private school community, which largely means mostly conservative thinking. And I never really bought into all of it to begin with. Um, and I remember having debates, probably in high school on all that stuff with my parents, especially with my mom. And eventually, my natural inclination was libertarian, and then I realized during law school that that makes no sense. It doesn't actually work. It's an idealistic view of the world to think you can trust people that much for it to work. So it's kind of the fool's system. It's the person who thinks everybody is going to be trustworthy, which is nonsense. So I completely flipped and became pretty firmly liberal. And leading up to 2016, you saw a lot of the 2016 election, you saw a lot of household divides start to happen.
right,
There were definitely some adamant arguments. I'm not even going to say which parent and on which issue, it doesn't matter. The point is, neither one of them stayed with their party history. Although, actually, even before that, I know for a fact that my dad had voted both sides of the aisle in the past. Not sure what specificity there, but at any rate, they both chose willingly to leave their viewpoint. And politics in America over the last 5 years has taken another another extreme degree of place in personal identities that really is starting to get to untenable levels. But anyway, I'm not going to dive too much into that. But the point is, I saw my parents choose to continue to evolve. So, speaking from that vantage point and recognizing my friendships that still hold tight now, and my relationships that hold tight now, and contrasting it to those that do not, continued evolution seems to hit. And I don't personally go through it within my immediate family, but I know others, including yourself, who've had to deal with a lack of evolution in a variety of ways, whether it be political divides, whether it be other kinds of growth divides. But the point is that there's kind of a shared center to all that, which is a lack of desire to continue to change, to move away from that which was comfortable and normal, because that's what you continue to do in
Yeah.
life.
And, I really wonder if, other people in the diaspora, people, you know, uh,
The
from
African diaspora specifically.
the African diaspora and really even, maybe beyond that, right? People who are from elsewhere that have come here, their family units. I wonder if they deal with these, to what extent they deal with these types of issues where, the toxicity comes from, one particular aspect of that family dynamic, just refusing, to really let go. Because that's what it is. Like, they don't really let go of this sort of perceived power dynamic that they benefited from, prior to sort of, transposing themselves into this new society. Because
Right.
when, things are bound to change, I'm not gonna, my daughter's not gonna have the same upbringing that I did. So the same challenges, that I face with my relationship with my parents right now, I'm likely going to face something similar with my daughter because my daughter's going to have a completely different perspective of the world that
Hmm.
she lived in than I did.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
world, right? And so I'm trying to prepare myself for that, and at the same time, I'm trying to uh, encourage my parental units to do the same thing. Like, let's have an engaging conversation. I'm not saying I'm right.
Right.
I'm just trying to make you accept my perspective the same way you want me to accept yours.
Right.
You know, because it's basically for you, it's more of an expectation because of where we come from, right? But for me, it's more of an encouragement. I'm trying to encourage you to see me, as a self.
Right.
Not
That's kind of the classic um, separation issue
right,
to becoming an adult, um, that transcends cultures, backgrounds, religions, whatever.
right,
Um, and I think the differences are more on an individual basis, but there probably are some cultural alignments. Um, certainly you're touching on one that is cultural specific, of the power dynamic specific aspect.
right.
Is specific to the culture that you're raised in, and one that's not going to be present, or so you intend, uh, with your daughter, right? Because part of the reason that I moved to Austin initially, when you and I got a place together, was because I needed to be in surroundings that were not the same. I needed to not be in the comfort zone of the same 30-mile radius or 40-mile radius that I'd lived in my entire life,
Right.
outside of one summer in Chicago. Uh, because traveling around and going on vacations, that doesn't really do it.
Mhm.
Living in a new place, being away from the safety nets, um, those things, it changes you. And there's physical distance, and then there's also, perspective difference in becoming your own person and choosing the things that you wish to choose, be present in your life. And you know shoot, I've never actually said this in a public forum before. I do not have a religion. I don't.
Mhm.
I was raised in one.
Yeah.
But and as much as in any personal conversation, I would be willing to answer that question honestly to anybody, including to my grandmother, who, if she chooses to watch this, is probably going to be, you know, having some feelings about what I just said.
Right.
It's true. I don't have a religion.
Mhm.
And choosing to own the thing that separates you from your family in whatever way it is, it can be hard. Um,
It really
this,
it's extremely difficult. I mean, I had some some pretty interesting development happen like with people back home. Because one of my family members on my mother's side, I don't really have a relationship with, and when I decided to sort of sever that connection, it caused a lot of issues with a lot of people, including that person that himself.
mm,
But I remember when I first got to Senegal, like before all of those events happened, I would tell him all the time, listen, man, I don't, because he was complaining a lot about other people. And I told him, I personally don't adhere to the notion that uh, your family, because like in my culture, that's how it is. Like family is almost like a sacred thing,
mhm,
right? So your
mhm.
family, they can't do you no wrong. But at the same time, in that same culture, you know, the people who can harm you the most are your family. You know, whether no
It's
matter
almost like the first enables the second there.
right. And I told him, listen, the people like people are people. People are people, whether they're your family or otherwise.
And Lola's gonna high five you on that one.
The same, the same way somebody out there could harm you. Whether it's a lone shooter in America or maybe like a bandit in one of the regions in Senegal, or maybe somebody tried to take advantage of you at the market down in the in central Dakar. They're all people. We're all infallible. So I'm not gonna walk around
We're,
you know
we're all fallible, I think is what you were going for.
fallible, right? I'm not gonna walk around with this sort of naive notion that you know my family always has my best interests at heart, or like all of my family members do. Some of them don't.
Mm,
And if I realize that they don't have my best interests at heart, or maybe if our belief systems or our attitudes about towards life don't align, then I'm not going to have a relationship with that person. It's just simple as that. It's better if we don't have a relationship than continue to have a relationship where it's just going to be seeped in constant conflict and misunderstanding. Like that's stressful for me. You know what I'm saying? So like instead of having that constant stress in my life, I'd rather just kind of take a step back and you know let them sort of pursue their life trajectory in any way, shape, or form that they wish to do, and I'll do my own thing. That way,
yeah.
no one like we don't have to have a relationship, and
Where do you think that you got inspired to take this strong of
it's been a long time coming, man.
independence?
It's been a long time coming. Like I'll remind you of some of the things we even talked about. If you recall, this and I think it probably all started when my dad left. When my dad left the country and came to the U.S. right in society. I quickly realized that the people that were coming to our home and eating our food every day, because my dad was willing to feed all of them. Like there were people in my house every day.
Yeah.
Like people would show up to eat lunch at my house. And most of those people didn't give a shit about me or my siblings or my mother or really my dad.
They were
They
just leeches.
right, they were just legion, right? And so when my dad left, so did they. So then we had to figure out how to fend for ourselves, for about 2 years before we came eventually made our way to America. And so that was a huge eye opener for me, you know, about what the actual human condition is. You know what I mean? That sort of, that inherent selfishness that humans have.
Mm.
To always, mostly look out for the self rather than, the unit. Even though it
Yeah,
might,
it's interesting, selfishness, right? By itself, the word selfish isn't nearly as venomous as often gets made out to be. Selfish means you act in the interest of yourself.
right,
Um, it's sort of a weird blessing to say this, and at the same time, it's a point of pain to admit it. I'm a selfish dude, and I know that I am. But in a way, uh, it it keeps me from being dependent,
right,
in a lot of ways, not in all ways. I'm emotionally a little more dependent than you know. We don't need to get too far into that at the moment. But I can. There's some dependency there,
right,
but selfishness and understanding selfishness as a human condition, it is an interesting one, because coming to grips with the fact that someone's not going to have your interests at heart is eye opening, because it also, this kind of ties into to our day job. I think so just a little background here. We both work for an affiliate law firm that it's an affiliate of LegalZoom, and file trademarks, okay, on behalf of our clients, and we do it in a very high volume. And one thing that job has really showed me in ways that I didn't see to the degree in which I see it now is inherent trust. Okay, inherent trust in what it means to be attuned to the selfish motivations of others, and carry them yourself, right? It's fascinating to me how some of our client base, and a rather large population of it, I don't have a percentage and I'm not going to try to rough it, but it's not the majority, that's all I can tell you,
yeah,
don't come in with inherent trust.
yeah,
And that tells me a similar thing to the lesson that you learned about inherent trust, and who deserves inherent trust. Does
right,
anyone deserve inherent trust? And maybe the answer is no. Maybe the answer is no, because these people come in and they're fighting with you, and literally our job is to represent their interest. Our
right,
job is to be their ally and advocate. And we have an ethical obligation to do so. They don't know that, and they don't care. So you have to find a way in some of those conversations to help get this person empathetically. You have to do it with empathy, or it pretty much always fails. So it's a great teacher in how to work with someone who's been taught about the human condition in very honest ways. Um, that inherent trust is a bullshit thing. And those of us who had a lot of that growing up, and believe that we deserve it going out there in the world, it's a bullshit thing. You don't deserve inherent trust. You need to earn everybody's trust,
right,
and be ready for people who don't inherently trust you.
right.
Uh, that's a hard lesson. And you learned that at age 14, 13?
14.
Yeah, that's a big lesson to learn at 14.
Yeah, and like that, that for me, like that's kind of when I grew up. Like it was very clear for me. Like there's no, like there was no way I couldn't see it, because it was just like so vivid. How things change like overnight, literally.
Yeah.
I've always kind of been that way. Like since then, I've always kind of been very sort of independent. Like always try to chart my own path. So
Yeah.
like when I came to America, you know, like I never asked my dad for help with anything. Like I always try to do everything my own. You know, college, I got to college on my own. I got some grants, got some loans, and when I finished college, it was a perfect opportunity for me, because I was like, I'm gonna get out of Texas. I'm not gonna stay in Texas for grad school. So I didn't even bother applying to Texas law schools. I just applied to out of state schools because I wanted to get out. I went to Iowa on my own, just with 2 suitcases. I took a bus to Iowa. I didn't even have enough money to afford a plane ticket.
Man.
So like I went to Iowa, man. Like I took a 24-hour bus ride to Iowa, and like, I learned so much about myself. I did study abroad. I learned that I could I could actually survive on my own in a foreign country. So then when I finished law school, I went and lived in Europe for a while, for half a year, and then I came back. I always wanted to be independent, of my family, my parents, because, they're always kind of, especially my mom, she never really wanted me to do any of these things. Like she always wanted me to kind of stay close, you know, so that, I would, we would sort of keep those same sort of family dynamics of like that power structure. I'm like, I don't really believe in this. Like I believe in, self-determination. Like I want to be able to like figure out who I am on my own, the same way you had that, you did, in a lot of ways, I guess, in,
Yeah.
in your life. But it's difficult. It's difficult for, people from my culture to accept that, to accept the fact that I can, your child can be his own person,
Mm.
uh, rather than somebody who's just supposed to accept everything you say.
It reminds me a little bit of a friend of ours, and I'm not going to name him, but he went to med school, very bright guy. He's Nigerian, and what he really wanted to do was filmmaking.
Right.
And now he's pursuing it, and by all measures, seeming to find some success, which is great. But there, the cultural expectation that you will go to school, you will get one of these preset prestigious degrees, and you will go be a professional in that discipline. Lola, my for those of you who don't know, which should be probably everybody who's watching this, but maybe you don't. That's my fiance, and she felt pressure for a long time to get her CPA. And so when I was giving I tend to be a little bit of a pusher, but I push on something that someone expressed that they want to do. And so I'm going to, okay, let's go. And she told me early on that she was considering getting her CPA and wanted to do so. So I bought her a study guide book. And over the course of a couple years, she didn't really want to do it. And I don't know how long she knew that she didn't want to, but was fighting against the pressures of the upbringing. And it wasn't even, necessarily pressure from her parents specifically. I don't get that energy from her.
Right.
And, but that the powerful thumb of the African parent, and even maybe the culture, in support of, or sometimes in Lola's case, instead of, the parent, pushes the kids in a certain direction to follow a certain way of life. And it sounds like that's an experience that you're tangling with now. So let's bring it up to the present. What's going on with that you don't mind divulging?
So what's going on is my relationship, like I guess with my parents, is you know I, I don't know if something you would call smooth or healthy.
You have some thorns in the tire, and maybe you need to change the tire.
It's definitely challenging at the moment,
Yeah.
uh, because we're not communicating very well,
Mm.
you know, and the reason why we're not communicating very well is because I tend to voice my opinion. Like if I hear my mom or my father say something that I don't necessarily agree with, from an, and then as an objective as a viewpoint as I can sort of, digest what they're saying, I'll give them a piece of my own mind, right? And you know how I talk, like, the way I
Everything you do with the floating, it's
that
the opposite energy with your opinion sharing.
right. It's just I'm not even thinking that this is gonna like you're gonna see this as like an affront,
Right.
like because I'm
Lola's kind of similar to you in that regard.
yeah, like
The
because I'm
truth comes out as the truth.
yeah, like I just say it, like I don't think that's I would just say like I don't think that's right. Like I disagree with that, but because of that inherent sort of power dynamic that's been a part of our relationship for so long, when I do that, they see it as an affront. They see it as me challenging their authority, and then if instead of hearing me out, you know they go into their shell, they get defensive, um, and that creates a lot of conflict. So at the moment when we speak, we're basically just kind of just, there's a lot of small talk that we're having. We're not really having in-depth conversations about a lot of different things. And I wish, like, I really wish I could have these types of conversations with my parents. I wish I could, you know, talk about, you know,
So
like religion, things like, you know, the notion of God, the afterlife, raising a child.
what would happen for you if you just started that conversation?
I don't think they would know what to say. I don't.
So I, I gather that the conversations that have led to the issue didn't involve a whole lot of mutual listening.
No, not a lot. Like as soon as what it is that they said at the time was said, and I expressed my disagreement, it became, at least from their perspective, an argument. And then from my end, I'm just trying to, like, be objective and say, basically just say my piece in an objective way, and then you know at least have that particular factor be part of their equation. But it's on their end, they're seeing it as an attack, like, as me challenging them and all this stuff. Like, it's not a challenge. I'm just telling you, I'm giving you my opinion,
Yeah.
you know
So
yours. But you're not taking it very well. You're taking it as an affront, as an attack. So, like, there's a lot of emotion that comes, you know, from them, as a response to, my whatever statement I'm sort of,
yeah,
I'm giving out.
yeah. You know, I'm listening to this, and I'm sorry that you're going through it, because it's painful.
Right.
That said, as you know, with me, like I know with you, we both tend to be solution minded at bottom.
Right.
And my mind can't help but go to, do you think there is a solution? Just in this very simple question, do you think there's a solution?
The one solution that I've adopted in the past couple of weeks, and I don't know if we talked about this. I know I've talked about it with Krissa and at least one other person. What I've decided to do going forward is just accept the fact that they're not going to change.
Hmm.
So that's what I'm kind of working on right now, like acceptance. I'm trying
That's
to.
good. That's good.
My parents are beyond, you know, evolving to what I think they could evolve to. That they're going to be set in their ways, and if it's not worth a discussion or a fight or an argument, I'm just not going to have it with them.
Okay.
But at the same, there's some things that come with that, which is what I'm saying. Like, we're not going to be having these sort of in-depth conversations that I wish I could have with them, because that's kind of how I picture things to be. Like, as I grew older, as I become more of a family man, I would be able to breach some of these types of conversations with my parents, be able to have, active, productive discussions, where, I get, they share their perspective and I share mine, and we can just have, an objective conversation. But I basically learned that's not going to be the case, because, as far as they're concerned, this is, I'm mostly going to get emotion out of them rather than, objective thoughts.
Have you ever just asked them what they think the afterlife consists of?
I've never, no.
What if you what if you asked them questions
I guess I could, but I feel like,
without your opinion involved?
I think I would just get, I know what I'm going to get out of them. You know, I'm going to, I, you know, I'm, I, they're Muslim. My parents are Muslim. So I know what I'm going to get out of that.
And I'm sure you know very well.
The things
At
that,
the same time,
yeah,
your parents are probably, whether it's on this issue or other, I don't mean specifically on this issue, they're probably still capable of surprising you.
That would be nice. I mean, I would be all for that.
Yeah, and it could be in any facet, like I said, not specific to this one, but you could also try assertiveness. Assertiveness meaning you state your need as your need without it being contentious, without it being aggressive, without it being passive. So you say, I would like to have conversations with you about the afterlife, or maybe where it's not about agreement, it's just exchanging ideas. And just see what that, if that answer goes badly, then it's probably toast, right? But and the reason I say these things to you is because I've seen you both be hard-headed and obstinate and combative,
Yeah.
and also open-minded and probative.
Yeah.
And they're two different modes, and it can be very hard with parents to do something because the other side to this perspective that parents have a power dynamic is that you may not even realize it in the moment that you are acting your role in the power dynamic by trying to be feisty and have your way when you know you're not going to get it with them, instead of treating your parents as just another person who requires probing and curiosity to learn more about at times instead of just demands, right?
I mean, you said it beautifully. Like what you said right now is like what I'm trying to work on. I'm just trying to figure out like the proper approach.
Yeah.
You know,
It's hard, dude.
get there with them, like have these sort of like more productive conversations.
Yeah.
Um, and I haven't yet figured it out. Like I haven't yet figured out the approach. Like I know the overall goal, what the overall goal is, which is basically what you said, and that's what I was kind of alluding to when I said, I'm just gonna refuse having arguments with them, contentious arguments, because it doesn't lead to anything productive. They just get emotional and they start.
Yeah, it becomes a matter of, I, the child, am not adopting you, the parent's wishes on manner in which to live my life, right? Which is really what's at heart of most child-parent arguments. And it's funny that I'm saying that now because I've never really thought of it in those terms, but really that is so much of my own arguments with my parents, especially my mom. My dad and I are usually arguing about some piece of information, and it's not really about flexing, it's more just about debating, where the debates of this variety happen with my mom way too often. we're both arguers, so some of it's that too, but yeah, I think there's an undercurrent of your own role as the child that you unwittingly have probably been playing the part of, while being frustrated with them playing their part.
Yeah, I definitely have. Like when I had this really sort of contentious argument with my mother, and I told you about this, and I called one of my younger brothers to sort of discuss it with him, and he basically agreed with all of the things that I had issues with, as far as the argument that I had with my mom. But he kept saying, well, I think you probably want to just maybe work on your tone a little bit, and like
take it easy, I believe was the phrase that you said he used.
Right, take it easy and just like kind of soften your tone a bit.
Yeah, and I used a very similar phrase with you in meaning, not in words. I told you, you got to understand the emotional state that is built into her perspective here, because it had to do with changes.
Right.
It had to do with changes. And as a parent, I'm not even close to this because I don't have my own kids yet, but the idea of, at some point, your kids no longer care what you think.
Right.
And after a lifetime of being able to have sway in what you think, to lose that sway is hard.
Yeah, yeah, dude, that's exactly what the whole conflict is really, about. Like that's what it comes down to. The fact that as a parent, you know, they're realizing that the influence that they had on their kid is waning.
Yeah, it's baked. Whatever's there is there. Whatever's not is toast.
And it's sad because like it's that is dangerous to me. Like that's a dangerous attitude to have because you have blinders on.
Well,
But at the
but
same time, I get it. I
yeah, I
understand.
was gonna say it doesn't sound that dangerous to me. It just sounds more naive.
Yeah, naive, dangerous.
Because the danger is just that you won't be able to have that conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Like it to me, it stunts the growth of the relationship.
So I mean, just to kind of reframe it in another perspective here, it sounds like what you're looking for is you're trying to find the person to person adult relationship with your parents, not as your parents.
Yeah,
And maybe they're not so comfortable with transitioning away from parental role.
yeah, yeah. That's basically what it is because I'm able to like you know take take stock of who I am as a person and understand you know things I do well and like what my faults are as a human being. Like what my
Yeah,
where do I fail?
yeah, and reassess and then try to make moves.
Right.
You know,
I do the same thing with them, but they reject that.
well, and that's why I think if this were my handling of it, what I may be inclined to do is literally go to them and say, what I'm like trying to work out with you is I'd like to develop more of an adult to adult, person to person relationship with you, in addition to the parental child relationship that we've already got.
Right.
That one's done. You did your work. I'll always be your son.
Right. Yeah.
But now we have an opportunity to get to know each other as people and what we think about things.
Right.
We become friends.
Yeah. Because yeah, that's it. Like and that's the one thing I was talking about earlier. Like I think a lot of people in the diaspora when they watch this video, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Because,
I'm sure. I'm sure.
you know,
This
we all wish we could have that person to person. Like I wish my parent really knew who I was.
Well, yeah, it's huge because it's your identity, right? And it's funny because we hear horror stories in the United States of the opposite problem, that the parent cared too much about wanting to be the friend
Right.
and forgot to do the parenting work first
Right.
and failed to develop a mature adult human.
Hmm.
They failed to raise their child to become that.
Yeah.
Because they were focused on the friend side of things. So it's an interesting opposite side here, where now it's sort of like, and I guess I don't want to call it opposite side because I just used the word failure, and I'm not going to say what your parents are doing is failure. That's
Right.
not fair, and that's certainly not my intent. Uh, but just coming from the other side of, they did the right thing first. They did parent you first. That is
Right.
supposed to come first. It is number one. But what you're describing is maybe we can whittle down some of those rougher edges of parental power dynamic and child inferiority dynamic and get to know each other a little bit.
Absolutely.
Which, I can tell you here from my personal experiences, I'm in the stage of life where I've gotten to be doing that now with my parents for a number of years, and I have to be appreciative. So here's a shout out to you, mom and dad, for letting me become friends with the two of you as individuals.
Yes.
Um, it's a pretty cool thing, and to I think here we're gonna put a wrap on this conversation.
Wait to the next one.
Yeah, I think we've got a lot of really good stuff. Um, I feel a sense of gratitude and appreciation on a number of fronts right now, which is not necessarily the expected result of this conversation. How are you feeling right now?
I feel good. I feel good. I
You,
feel like I'm getting some pretty valuable insight. It always good. It's good to talk to, you know, a learned individual
I'm taking that. I am taking that.
about these things. It's kind of like you. It's like when you play that thing when you hit the ball on the wall. Is it badminton, whatever they call it, the sport?
Uh, Handball,
Is that handball when they hit?
racquetball, racquetball.
Is that's what it is? Like because you when you hit the ball on the wall, you were thinking, okay, you can guess the trajectory of where the ball is gonna where the ball is gonna go when it hits the wall, but you really can't. You guessing, right? But when it hits the wall and the ball comes through, like that's the true trajectory, and then you adjust. So that's what this is for me.
Well, and then you have someone else completely redirect the trajectory on their strike.
Right, exactly. And then
Yeah, yeah.
then you're learning a lot of good, valuable lessons about physics, but also just life in general.
Learning a lot about physics. I like that. That's going to be the line for the episode. Uh, oh man. Well, this is fun. Thanks for joining on Upper Back Hair, Malick. Say bye to the people for me.
Hey, I hope you guys enjoy the conversation, and hopefully I can come back as a guest in the future, and we can talk about some of the interesting topics.
Absolutely, absolutely.
People are people. People are people, whether they're your family or otherwise.
And Lola's gonna high five you on that one.